Hi, welcome to the Goblin Workshop. My name's Chad Hansen. Damn glad to meet you. I'm going to be showing you how I make some foam hills made for tabletop gaming for Warhammer, 40K, Malifaux, Hordes, that sort of stuff. I'm going to be using mostly pink insulation foam today. It's a nice material to use. I use it a lot on a lot of my terrains for hills, rocks, even walls, you name it. It's a very good substance to use. They come in a variety of sizes. You can get about 1/2 inch thick to 2 inch thick. I'm going to be using 1 inch. That's kind of what I like to use, especially for hills. It gives a nice even slope for you to use. Plus, if you get too big with the 2 inch thick stuff, you're going to have a very steep hill, almost a cliff, and it's not going to look very natural. The other thing is that this is really meant for insulating homes. So the 2 inch thick stuff actually has grooves going down the center of it, a foot from each end, and it's really meant for guys who'll break it right at that point, which is great for insulating homes, but really sucks when you're carving out and then you get to that gap. It's really noticeable. You don't want that. Okay, now that we've selected styrofoam, I'm going to show you how we cut this stuff. Now there's a few methods of cutting this stuff. You can use this foam cutter. It's designed for foam. Basically you've got a cord that plugs in and you got a wire, and this cord goes through it, the wire gets hot, and it just cuts it like a hot knife through butter. So, as you can see here, just take the wire and it cuts through, and voila. You get a nice smooth edge. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's very smooth. It's like it cuts right, it burns it, so it's nice and smooth. The problem with this is that this wire up here will eventually wear out. It'll get hot. It will burn itself through and break. And then you got to get a new wire, put it in there. Also, this will expand because of the temperature changes, and you got to end up tightening these things. I really don't use this. Also, I find it's a little slow. You might not. It has its uses. But I don't like it for general use. Another use is this. And this is not really meant for the mainstream stuff, but now, important note, whenever using power tools, always use safety glasses. I don't want anybody getting anything in their eye. That'll suck. So, much faster. However, the problem is the sides, it's kind of chipped up, and you got little particles off of the side. And it'll work if you got a big piece and you want to cut an area out, but I tend not to use this. The thing that I use the most is this knife. It's surprising that I have all these power tools, and I love power tools, but I'm going to stick with a knife. And I'm not using just any old knife. I've got another knife here that doesn't have a serrated edge. It's just straight. It doesn't cut through this very well. You want little serrades on it. You don't want big ones, because like some of those big steak knives, they'll cut through and they'll even cut this up even more. So I'm using this serrated knife. It cuts really well. Now when you're using this, you want to use it more like a saw than anything. You want to just go up and down motions with this. Guys, get your minds out of the gutter and just saw away. And this doesn't leave as smooth a surface as the foam cutter, but it doesn't leave as rough as the jigsaw. Okay, now that we know how to cut our stuff, I'm going to draw out where we're going to cut. It's important to draw this stuff out, because if you just start cutting away, you might end up making it too big, too small. So I just have the example. This is what the piece that we're going to be working on right now is this top piece. And I like to work on the top piece first and then work my way down. It's a lot easier to cut this out and then place it back on the styrofoam and then draw this piece out than it is the opposite way. Just because of the angles, it's a lot harder. Now I'll show you in a little bit here. But here is the top piece. I'm going to draw. You don't want a circle. Hills don't come in circles. They come in odd shapes. And this is going to be this distance right there. And we're going to end up angling it to about there. So really the top of the hill is only going to be about that big, which for Warhammer is only going to be about the size for a war machine. So I'll grab my knife here, slide some stuff out of my way, and I'll explain how I actually cut this stuff out. This is a pretty big chunk of styrofoam, so I'm just going to do a rough cut and cut a bunch of this away. Alright, now I got my piece here. Put that off to the side. Now, I'm going to cut this piece right on the line now. And I want to be straight up and down with my knife. And I'm going to have where I'm cutting just on the other side of the table edge. I'm putting my hand down here so this doesn't flop up and down when I'm cutting. And you don't want it too far away because that's going to start moving up and down. You want it pretty close to the table edge. So, remember, up and down movements, try not to force it. It will just cut if you've got a good knife. Now, pro tip, keep your fingers on this side of the table. Do not cut your fingers off. That will suck because you'll get blood all over your thing and you'll have to clean it up. Anyways, just keep cutting. So we got the outer diameter. Now I'm going to cut at roughly a 45-degree angle. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. I'm going to move this garbage out in front. And I'm going to move this out front so you can see a little easier. Plus it's a little easier for me to cut this way. I'm going to cut in at an angle. And what I'm attempting to do is to not have any of this side showing. I'm trying to cut to a point down there. I can be a little bit further behind. And again, back and forth movements. Right. So, what I'm looking for here is I'm looking to make sure it's a nice sharp edge there. I see some areas here where I kind of cut and backed off and went back at it and leaves a little area there. It's best to clean this stuff up right now. It's really hard to fix this later. Just a quick cut will take care of all that. Now that we got all of this nice and sharp edge, it's a straight 45-degree angle. Still doesn't look natural. So I'm going to give it another cut. And I'm going to give it even a sharper cut this time. I'm not going all the way down to the bottom. I'm cutting to about halfway up. So I'm cutting about here to here. I want to leave some of that original cut in there. Now the more cuts you make, the more of a slope you're going to give it. It's not going to give a nice, it's not going to have a sharp edge anymore. You want it rounded. So I'm going to give it one more pass here. And I think that's pretty good right now. Now you probably could go through and cut a few more pieces, especially if it was a thicker piece of styrofoam that you're cutting. You're probably going to want to cut maybe 2 more times, but on the smaller piece, that's pretty good. So let's grab our big stock again. And remember how I said you want to work on the top and work your way down? Well, this is where it's really helpful. If I was working on a bigger piece, I'd have to plop that down and kind of estimate where I want that, where to draw this next line. Well, here I can just put this right on top. And the cuts here are going to be about 2 inches. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just so I can give myself a little bit of leeway. So I'm going to go out to about here. I'm going to follow a path. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger on one side just so I have more of a stepped area. You can see on this piece I've got a top, but I have it a little space here and space over here that's still flat. And that's what I'm attempting to do over here. Now we can get rid of the top piece and continue to do everything that we did before.